Sometimes kindness shows up on the worst day of your life, wearing the face of a stranger who has nothing left to give, but gives anyway. This is a story about a man with empty pockets, a heavy heart, and a choice that would quietly change everything. It's a story that reminds us how one small act of compassion, done without expecting anything in return, can echo in ways we never imagine. Before we begin, if stories like this move your heart and remind you of the good still left in the world, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us keep telling meaningful stories here on Truth Lines USA. Now, let's begin. Mark Dawson never thought of himself as a hero. He was just a tired, single dad trying to survive. At 38, his hands were rough from years of construction work, and his eyes carried the quiet exhaustion of a man who hadn't slept peacefully since his wife passed away 3 years earlier. Every morning, he packed lunches for his 8-year-old son, Ethan, tied worn-out shoelaces, and whispered promises he wasn't sure he could keep. Money was always tight. After an injury on the job, Mark lost steady work and fell behind on bills. The hospital debt from his wife's illness still followed him like a shadow. Worse, he had a court date coming up. A mistake, a misunderstanding involving an old truck payment had snowballed into a legal mess. One judge would decide if Mark walked free or lost everything, including custody of his son. That cold November evening, Mark's old pickup coughed and rattled as he drove home from a late shift at a diner where he washed dishes for cash. His gas light was on, his stomach empty, and his mind racing with worry. All he wanted was to get home to Ethan, who was waiting with a neighbor. That's when he saw them. 2 girls stood on the side of the road near a closed gas station. They looked about 16. Identical faces framed by dark hair, clutching thin jackets against the cold. One was on the phone, tears streaking her cheeks. The other waved desperately as cars sped past. Mark slowed down. His first instinct was to keep driving. He didn't have money. He didn't have time. He didn't even have enough gas. But then he thought of Ethan. He imagined his son stranded somewhere, scared, hoping someone would stop. Mark pulled over. "Everything okay?" he asked gently, rolling down the window. The girls rushed toward the truck. "Our car broke down," one said, her voice shaking. "We tried calling roadside assistance, but they said it'll be hours. Our dad's out of town and we don't know what to do." Mark glanced at the darkening sky and the empty road. He hesitated, then nodded. "Get in. I'll help however I can." Inside the truck, the girls introduced themselves as Lily and Lauren, twins. Their car had overheated a mile back and their phones were nearly dead. Mark listened quietly, offering calm words, even as his own worries pressed down on him. He drove them back to their car, popped the hood, and confirmed what he already suspected. The engine was done for the night. "I can take you somewhere warm," Mark said. "There's a 24-hour diner a few miles away. You can wait there, charge your phones." "But we don't have money," Lauren said softly. Mark smiled, though it hurt. "Neither do I. But I know the owner. I work there." At the diner, Mark bought them hot chocolate using the last of his cash, money he had planned to spend on gas the next morning. He gave them his own jacket when Lily started shivering. He cracked jokes to make them laugh, even though his heart was heavy. When their phones finally charged, Lily reached her father. "He's coming," she said, relief flooding her face. "He said to thank you. He's really grateful." Mark waved it off. "Just glad you're safe." When the girl's father arrived, he rushed in, breathless and shaken. He hugged them tightly, then turned to Mark with tears in his eyes. "Thank you," the man said. "You have no idea what this means to me." Mark nodded, embarrassed. Anyone would have done the same. The man extended his hand. I'm Robert Hayes. Mark shook it. Mark Dawson. They exchanged a few polite words before Mark quietly slipped out into the night, jacketless and nearly out of gas, but with a strange warmth in his chest. The next week, Mark stood in a courtroom, his hands clenched, his stomach in knots. Ethan sat with a social worker behind him. This was it. One decision would determine their future. Case of Mark Dawson, the clerk called. Mark stepped forward, barely breathing. When the judge entered, Mark's heart dropped. It was Robert Hayes, the same man, the same face, the same voice. Mark felt dizzy. He didn't know whether to feel hope or fear. Surely the judge wouldn't even remember him. He was just some poor guy in a beat-up truck. But Judge Hayes looked down and froze. Their eyes met. Recognition flashed across the judge's face, followed by something deeper. Respect. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Hayes cleared his throat. Mr. Dawson, he said evenly. I recall meeting you recently. Mark swallowed. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Hayes paused, then continued. Before we proceed, I want to state for the record that this court will remain fair and impartial. He reviewed the case carefully. He listened. Really listened. He asked questions no one had bothered to ask before. He saw the truth beneath the paperwork, a hard-working father crushed by circumstances, not bad intentions. After a long moment, Judge Hayes spoke. Mr. Dawson, given the evidence and your efforts to make things right, this court rules in your favor. Charges dismissed. Payment plan adjusted. Custody remains with you. Mark's knees nearly buckled. Tears streamed down his face as he turned to see Ethan smiling, eyes shining. As the courtroom emptied, Judge Hayes approached Mark quietly. I need you to know, he said, voice low. That night you helped my daughters when you had nothing. You didn't ask who they were or what you'd get in return. You reminded them and me what real character looks like. Mark shook his head. I just did what anyone should. Judge Hayes smiled. Not everyone does. Weeks later, Mark found steady work through a connection Judge Hayes offered. Not a favor, just an opportunity. Life didn't become perfect overnight, but it became manageable, peaceful, hopeful. Mark still drove that old pickup, still packed lunches, still worried sometimes. But he walked a little taller now, knowing that kindness, even in the darkest moments, mattered. Because you never know who's watching. And you never know how far a simple act of compassion can travel. So the next time you're tired, broke, or overwhelmed, and life asks you to choose between turning away or showing kindness, remember this story. Kindness has a way of finding its way back. Let it start with you.